Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. My name is Patrick Onen. Mr. Secretary General, you come to Uganda at the backdrop of international condemnation on the Anti-Homosexuality Act that the country just passed. The U.S. has passed out some sanctions on Ugandans. What is your stand as the United Nations? And is this something that you have perhaps talked with the Ugandan leadership?
I said yesterday in the summit that there should be not any form of discrimination, and the rights of all minorities should be respected. I just read in my statement to the press.
When will the West ever learn? Africa is not falling for their tricks anymore. We have just listened to China come out and say, hey man, whatever you guys do in Africa, your biz, we respect your faith, we respect your culture, let's do some trading, let's make some money. Now, on the other hand, we have the UN Security Council, who in this video is talking about, it's favorable that Africa is going to get a seat at the UN. Great. But when they get to decide who gets a seat at the UN and as to why they get a seat at the UN, they're getting a seat somewhere where there's rules that have to be abided by. But Africa didn't help make the rules. Africa didn't have a say in it. So why does the Security Council get to delegate Africa's human rights? You see, they don't get to delegate Africa's human rights. And it is eating them up inside. It is tearing them apart. We need Africa. We need Africa to listen to us. And Africa is saying, nope. With this video, we're going to see a lot of things. The UN agreeing, yes, that Africa needs a seat at the table. Africa is definitely on the bottom end of the stick here with finances. We need to adjust the monetary system to fit Africa's needs better, which is great. But then we get to the LGBTQ at the end, and it all falls apart right there. But I'm going to let you all watch it. I'm going to watch it with you, and I want to say thank you again. Let's check this out. Remember, like and subscribe, and hit some comments. Let me know what you're thinking about what he's saying up there, and we'll go over it together as it moves along. All right? Let's check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon.
Grab a drink.
It is a pleasure to be here in Kampala and to meet the leaders of two of the most important partners of the United Nations, the Non-Aligned Movement and the G77 plus China. The share of official development assistance going to Africa is at its lowest level in more than 2 decades. And high interest rates put private finance largely out of reach of so many countries. Meanwhile, conflicts are multiplying and human rights and international law are being flouted, from Russia's invasion to the Ukraine, to Sudan, and to the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, my message is to the Non-Aligned Movement and the G77 plus China, focused on renewed international efforts for peace, financing for sustainable development and climate action, and the need for urgent reforms to all multilateral institutions. From the United Nations Security Council to the Bretton Woods system, global institutions reflect the world that built them 80 years ago, when many African countries were still colonized. They are no longer fit for purpose. Security Council is stuck in a time warp. How can we accept that it still lacks a single African permanent member? The global financial system is outdated, dysfunctional, and unfair. This September, the United Nations will convene the Summit of the Future with a focus on updating these institutions so that they align with today's world and respond to today's challenges, notably to the vital interests of developing countries. The new Agenda for Peace calls for a new generation of peace operations, including peace enforcement and counter-terrorism operations, led by regional partners, notably the African Union, but with a Security Council mandate and supported by guaranteed funding, including through UN-assessed contributions. I've been urging this for many years, and I welcome the Security Council's recent resolution in support. As a matter of fact, it does make sense to have peacekeeping operations where there is no peace to keep. We need peace-enforcing operations, African peace-enforcing operations, but properly supported by the international community. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, peace and sustainable development go hand in hand. Developing countries have a large and growing share of the global economy, but their representation in global financial institutions lags far behind. September Summit of the Future will consider ways to reform the global financial architecture and make it truly universal and responsive to today's global challenges. In the immediate term, we need urgent action on debt, including a reprieve for countries facing unsurmountable debt repayment obligations over the next 3 years. And we also need faster progress on an SDG stimulus of $500 billion a year in accessible long-term finance for sustainable development. Multilateral development banks must be adequately capitalized and must change their business models to leverage far more private finance for developing countries at reasonable cost to invest in the SDGs. And developed countries must meet their pledges on climate finance. Clarifying the delivery of the $100 billion and doubling adaptation finance are an essential starting point for much greater ambition. The unity and tenacity of the Global South helped to create the Loss and Damage Fund, but it now needs significant contributions to fulfill its purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations is working around the world to support the efforts of developing countries to mobilize domestic resources and maximize investments in the SDGs. Strong, cohesive societies can only be built on a foundation of advancing sustainable development, respecting human rights, and recognizing the rights of minorities and standing up to all forms of discrimination. It is critical to uphold the basic human rights of every person, regardless of background, race, religion, sexual orientation, or political opinion. Here in Kampala, governments from the Global South have stressed the importance of multilateral solutions based on global justice and international law. Their strong voices will resonate across the year of global reforms. This is the only path to a safer, fairer, more peaceful world for all, and I thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary General. My name is Timothy from UBC. The question is the big divide between the Global North and the Global South. How do you plan to bridge that gap, especially leveraging on a youthful population in Africa? Thank you very much.
Well, one thing is clear. The institutions that today are relevant for development, for climate action, the international financial institutions were created after the Second World War. When they were created, very few African countries existed as independent countries. And so they reflect the world of the post-Second World War instead of reflecting the world of today. That means that the Global South is in a position of clear inferiority because it lacks an effective representation in those institutions. The Security Council, the Bretton Woods institutions. And because of that, obviously those institutions have been more attentive to the needs of the Global North than to the needs of the Global South. And there is an increase of inequality that needs to be quickly corrected. That is why we have been asking for the reform of the institutions, to make them exactly adapted to the reality of today's economy, for an adequate representation, namely Africa, and at the same time for a set of measures in relation to debt relief, in relation to the SDRs, the special drawing rights redistribution, in relation to the change of the business model and the capitalization of multilateral development banks, in order to mobilize much more resources for the African countries to be able to address the enormous challenges that they face. We live today a world that is unfair, with outdated and dysfunctional institutions. We must reform those institutions and create conditions to effectively fight inequality and to provide the African continent with the resources that are needed to address the aspirations of a youth that is its most important potential.
Thank you. Second question, AFP in the back.
Secretary
Secretary General Tina Smollett from APTV. We have a question. Where does the UN stand on Ethiopia-Somaliland maritime deal? And would you say, like the president of Somalia, that this is kind of an annexation? Thank you.
Well, we are always guided by our principles. And our principles are related to the unity, the sovereignty, and the territorial independence of countries, including Somalia. And we hope that through dialogue it will be possible to overcome the present situation.
Secretary General, Dorsa Jabari with Al Jazeera English. The non-aligned movement, and particularly African countries, seem to be emerging as the conscience of the world on Gaza. What we've seen here over the past few days especially. The Western countries have been talking repeatedly about rules-based international order. Where are the rules now? I want to get your thoughts on what's been coming out of these summits here and the difference that you've seen between the reaction of African countries on the ongoing war in Gaza compared to the Western countries.
The rules are clear. The rules are international law. The rules are the Charter of the United Nations. The rules are international humanitarian law. And we cannot have double standards. And for us it's clear that we are seeing in Gaza a violation of those rules, namely of international humanitarian law, and that situation needs to be corrected. So for us, there are no double standards. For us, the rules are the same, and they apply to everybody, and they are based on what the international community has built, namely through the UN Charter and international law. I must say I am hopeful in that regard. First, it is a clear injustice, a flagrant injustice, that there is not one single African member, permanent member of the Security Council. And the reason is obvious. Most of the countries of Africa were not independent when the UN institutions were created. But in recent declarations, public declarations, I've seen the permanent members being favorable to at least one African permanent member. The United States said so, the Russian Federation said so, China has been positive in this regard, the UK and France too. So for the first time, I'm hopeful that at least a partial reform of the UN Security Council could be possible for this flagrant injustice to be corrected and for Africa to have at least one permanent member in the Security Council. It is not guaranteed, nothing that of course depends on the Secretary General, it depends exclusively on member states, on the General Assembly, but for the first time I think there are reasons to be hopeful.
Thank you. Just one last question, maybe we'll see how patient the Secretary General is. Associated Press.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. My name is Patrick Onen. Mr. Secretary General, you come to Uganda at the backdrop of international condemnation on the Anti-Homosexuality Act that the country just passed. The US has passed out some sanctions on Ugandans. What is your stand as the United Nations? And is this something that you have perhaps talked with the Ugandan leadership?
I said yesterday in the summit that there should be not any form of discrimination, and the rights of all minorities should be respected. I just read in my statement to the press, let me see if I can find it again, a sentence in which it is critical to uphold the basic human rights of every person, regardless of background, race, religion, sexual orientation, or political opinion. So my position is, in relation to this, very clear, and it's based on the principle of non-discrimination that must be respected by every country.
I don't know if everybody caught the whole spec of that question that man didn't answer mostly, but he answered some, and he said a lot within what he said. But the gentleman asked him, okay, international rules, UN rules, or the anti-gay laws that Uganda passed, they're being sanctioned. Are they going to stop the sanctions, or has anybody talked to the leadership of Uganda about this? And he said, well, these are the rules. These are the rules for international law. These are the rules. No. So apparently nobody has talked to leadership of Uganda or Kenya or Zimbabwe or Ghana or any of these African countries. Nobody's talked to them or to their leadership about their international laws that they made without them, because Africa's not on the council. So they made their own laws, and they're trying to force their laws, international laws, on Africa. And Africa's like, well, did you talk to us about our laws and why they passed them and, what's going on there? And the man just, we don't do that. We won't. Africa. The man just said, you're favorable to get in. There's going to be a member coming in on the UN Security Council, which who cares really, because what the UN Security Council is, he tried saying that the UN Security Council is not double standards. They're double standard, triple standard, quadruple standard. They are the evil. So if you don't get in with the Security Council, it's no big deal, really. But he's saying, we'll let you in if you're abiding by our rules, and if everybody, all minorities, and he's trying to throw the LGBTQ in with the minorities. You see, they can't be. LGBTQ is not a minority, it's a choice. So how's that a minority? A choice. It's a bad choice. So maybe it's a minority because there's less people choosing that way. The world doesn't like it. Africa doesn't like it. But they're making Africa take it, saying you can only be a member of the Security Council if you don't have those anti-LGBTQ laws. So now we're looking for Nigeria. Now we're looking at Nigeria, puppets. They'll do it. South Africa, puppets. They'll do it. But I don't think there's a whole lot of other countries in Africa that would do it. And that's one thing about Africa, is it's been able to be this rebel voice of the world because it's not on the UN. They don't care what they think. They're common sense, down to earth people. They don't care what the UN thinks. It's not about their human rights laws. Even the guy speaking, what's his name, Antonio Guterres or something like that, from Portugal. Portuguese was the first country to ever own slaves, and he's the Secretary General in the Security Council. I mean, what? Do people? Okay, I don't want to make this a bad thing, because there a lot of good things are here happening with Africa. A lot of good things. The whole world's watching Africa because they're doing great things right now. Their market's going to skyrocket. We can see that with what's happening with China, and even the UN has to get in on it. They can't continue to act like they're acting. That's why they need to put someone in Africa on the council, on the member, on the board. Wow. Anyway, for that to be their main goal, to keep Africa out, after saying, okay, well, it was the man even made an excuse. Well, the reason why nobody's on the board is because they weren't colonized before the Second World War, so there really wasn't anybody that can come on the council. But now that things are in progress, yeah, now we could probably do it, even though it was flagrantly wrong. But now I think maybe we'll let one of them. But you got to do what we say, because we're the human rights experts. Come on. Anybody in the United States, if you're listening, I get more people in the U.S. watching. Our government sucks. France, their government sucks. Europe, most of 90% of European governments suck. They do. And who else? Canada, the government sucks. And I want Africans to know that it's not the people in the United States. It's the puppet government politicians that we got that are doing this. It's not us. It isn't. We are on your side. We are for you. And what they're doing is wrong in every way, shape, and form. They've been wrong for the longest time. We've been trying to tell them, and little by little, it's taking baby steps, and it's just getting really old, going way too slow for what could really move fast right now. We need this to move faster, and hopefully more Americans stand up and fight against this UN Security Council and the human rights crap that they're trying to pin Africa on. They're trying to make excuses on why not to help them. Why not to trade? And that hurts us too. That hurts Americans. It makes us look bad when we are trying to say, let's stop this all. Let's just, come on, man. Let's all get together on this and work it out to where everybody can be on the same level playing field in Africa and in America. It's time. Come on. It's getting old. Anyway, I'm just sorry. I'm just going on and on here. I'm rambling, but feeling it, you know? All right, well, let me know what you all think about the video. I'm going to keep you posted on anything and new upcoming events about Africa and what's going on in the summits and things like that. So I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, all those in Africa that are watching, thank you so much. We love you here, and we're still moving forward and pushing for you. All you in America watching, thank you for watching. Big thumbs up. Give me some comments down there on what you're thinking about all this, and I'll talk to you all later. Love you, and have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.